At its heart, game theory is simply the study of how people make decisions when the outcome depends, not just on their choices, but on what others decide to do as well. It's like chess, but often with much, much higher stakes. And the reason it matters is that this interactive decision-making is everywhere. Whether you're negotiating a deal,
Yeah.
competing in a market, or even just trying to figure out the best route to work. Understanding game theory can give you a real edge.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's not just about making the quote-unquote best move in isolation. It's about anticipating how others will react to your move, knowing that they're also trying to anticipate you.
Yeah, I can already see how this could get complex quickly. But you mentioned that game theory assumes people are rational. So does that mean that everyone's always acting in their own selfish interest? Not necessarily. Rational in game theory means that people are generally aiming to maximize their gains and minimize their losses, whatever those may be. And sometimes the most rational choice is to cooperate, even if it means you don't get the biggest slice of the pie. And that's where things get really fascinating. You've highlighted the prisoner's dilemma in your materials, a perfect example of this.
Oh yeah, the prisoner's dilemma. That one blew my mind a bit. Just the idea that doing what seems like the best thing for yourself can actually lead to a worse outcome for everyone involved. It's almost counterintuitive.
Exactly. And it highlights why cooperation is often so difficult, even when it's in everyone's best interest. Remember, in the prisoner's dilemma, each suspect is acting rationally from their individual perspective, but the lack of trust and communication leads them to a suboptimal outcome.
So even though both prisoners would be better off if they stayed silent, the fear of being betrayed leads them to confess. It's like they're trapped by their own rationality.
Precisely. It's a trap we fall into all the time in real life, not just in hypothetical prison cells. Think about arms races between countries. Each nation rationally builds up its weapons to protect itself. But the result is a terrifying escalation that makes everyone less safe.
Okay, now that you mention it, I see that pattern everywhere. It's like those price wars between airlines that I read about. They
No.
all keep trying to undercut each other to gain market share,
Mm-hmm.
but in the end, they all end up hurting their profits.
Yeah.
If they just cooperated and kept prices stable, everyone would benefit.
Exactly. That's the prisoner's dilemma playing out in the real world. And it illustrates why finding a stable, cooperative solution can be so elusive.
So how do we escape this trap? If everyone's acting rationally,
Mm-hmm.
but ending up with a bad outcome, where do we go from there? I see you've also got a lot of notes on this idea of Nash equilibrium. Is that the answer?
The Nash equilibrium is a key concept in game theory, but it's not so much a solution as a way of understanding where things tend to settle. It describes a state where no one player can improve their own outcome by changing their strategy alone. Everyone is making the best choice they can, given what everyone else is doing.
So it's like everyone's found a sort of balance, even if it's not the ideal outcome for everyone involved. I can see how that applies to the traffic example you mentioned earlier. Everyone chooses what they think is the fastest route, but that just leads to congestion and no one wins.
Exactly. The Nash equilibrium in that scenario is when traffic is so evenly distributed across all routes that no one could save time by switching. It's stable, but it's not necessarily efficient.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get this.
Yeah.
So finding the Nash equilibrium helps us understand where things will likely end up, even if it's not the best possible outcome. But how do you actually find a Nash equilibrium? Is there some sort of formula or magic trick?
There are mathematical methods for calculating Nash equilibria, and it can get pretty complex. But the good news is you don't always need advanced math to grasp the basic concept. Think about a simple game, like rock, paper, scissors. Is there a best strategy that guarantees you'll win every time?
Not really. Whatever you choose, there's always a chance you'll lose. I guess the best strategy is to be unpredictable, to keep your opponent guessing.
Exactly. And that's where the idea of a mixed strategy comes in. In games like rock, paper, scissors, the optimal strategy is to randomly mix your moves, making it impossible for your opponent to predict what you'll do next.
Wow, that's so cool. It's like you're injecting a bit of chaos into the system to disrupt any predictable patterns. This totally changes how I think about strategy.
And that's the beauty of game theory. It challenges our assumptions and helps us see familiar situations in a whole new light.
This whole idea of mixed strategies reminds me of negotiating. If you always go in with a hard line, people might see you as inflexible and be less willing to compromise. But if you're too accommodating, they might take advantage. Maybe the best approach is to mix it up, be unpredictable, and keep them on their toes.
You're absolutely right. Game theory offers some really interesting insights into negotiation tactics, in fact. The concept of credible commitments is crucial in any negotiation.
Credible commitments. I'm not sure I'm familiar with that term. What does it mean?
It means being able to convince the other side that you'll actually follow through on your threats or promises. Imagine you're negotiating a business deal. You might threaten to walk away if your demands aren't met. But if the other side doesn't believe you're serious, your threat has no power.
So it's not just about making threats. It's about making threats that people believe you'll actually carry out. Otherwise, they're just empty words.
Precisely. Credibility is key. And building credibility requires consistency, reputation, and sometimes even signaling your willingness to take a loss to prove your point.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all ties together. It's like a complex web of strategy, anticipation, and signaling. And it seems like the applications are endless. You mentioned business negotiations. But I bet this applies to everything from politics to personal relationships.
Absolutely. Game theory can help us understand everything, from why countries go to war to why people stay in unhappy marriages. It's about understanding the incentives that drive behavior and the strategic choices we make in response to the actions of others.
You know, it's amazing to me how this one framework can be applied to such diverse areas. It's like we're seeing the world through a new lens, one that reveals the hidden strategic dynamics at play in everything we do.
It's truly a powerful tool for understanding human behavior and the forces that shape our world.
This is also fascinating. I'm already seeing connections everywhere. But
Yeah.
before we get too carried away, I want to bring it back to the listener.
Yeah.
What's one key takeaway you think they should walk away with from this initial dive into game theory?
I think the biggest takeaway is that we're constantly engaged in strategic interactions, even when we don't realize it. Understanding game theory can help us make more informed decisions, anticipate the actions of others, and navigate the complexities of a world where our choices are intertwined.
That's a great point. It's like game theory gives us a roadmap for navigating the world of strategic decision-making,
Yeah.
from the boardroom to the bedroom. And knowing the rules of the game can empower us to make better choices
Yeah,
that lead to more favorable outcomes.
exactly. It's about seeing the world with a more strategic eye, understanding the incentives that drive behavior,
Yeah.
and using that knowledge to our advantage.
I'm already starting to look at everything differently. But we've only just scratched the surface of this vast and intriguing topic. There's so much more to explore. You mentioned option theory, signaling theory, even evolutionary biology. I'm dying to dive into those.
We'll get to all of that. There's a whole universe of fascinating examples waiting to be uncovered. But for now, let's take a moment to let all of this sink in. We've covered a lot of ground, from the basics of game theory to the power of mixed strategies and credible commitments.
Right. We've gone from the prisoner's dilemma to traffic jams, to international arms races. My head is spinning a bit, but in a good way. I'm already seeing the world differently, and I know our listener is too.
That's the goal, to open your mind to new ways of thinking and to empower you with the tools of strategic thinking.
All right. Deep divers, we're going to take a quick pause here, but don't go anywhere. We'll be back soon to delve even deeper into the fascinating world of game theory and uncover even more mind-blowing insights. Welcome back, everyone. I'm still buzzing from our discussion about mixed strategies and credible commitments. It's amazing how these concepts can be applied to so many different situations.
It's true. Game theory provides a versatile lens for understanding strategic interactions in all sorts of contexts.
Speaking of different contexts, you mentioned auction theory earlier.
Yeah.
It's always felt a bit mysterious to me. Like there's some secret code I'm not privy to. Can we crack that code a little? What are some of the game theory insights that can help us understand how auctions really work?
Let's dive in. Auctions are fascinating because they bring together multiple players, each with their own motivations and strategies, all vying for a single prize. And game theory helps us understand the different types of auctions and the optimal strategies for each.
Okay, so it's not just about yelling out the highest number. There's actual strategy involved.
Oh, absolutely. The strategy comes in deciding how much to bid,
Right.
when to bid, and even whether to bid at all. Take, for example, a first price sealed bid auction where everyone submits a secret bid and the highest bidder wins. How do you decide what to bid in that scenario?
I guess you'd have to weigh the risk of overbidding and
Yeah.
potentially losing money if you win against the risk of underbidding and losing the item altogether.
Exactly. You're trying to outsmart the other bidders without outsmarting yourself. It's a delicate balance. And then you have scenarios like the second price sealed bid auction, where the highest bidder wins, but only pays the second highest bid.
Wait, so if I bid $100, but the second highest bid is only $50. I only have to pay $50. That seems counterintuitive.
It does seem strange at first, but it actually encourages bidders to be more honest. In this format, it's in your best interest to bid your true valuation because you're guaranteed to never pay more than what the item is actually worth to you.
That's clever. It removes the incentive to try to lowball everyone else.
Right. And this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to auction theory. There are countless variations and strategies, each with its own unique dynamics. It's a field that can really make you think about how incentives drive behavior.
It's mind-boggling to think that there's so much strategic thinking going on behind something as seemingly simple as an auction. It's like a whole hidden language of strategy.
Yeah. And that language extends beyond auctions into all sorts of areas. Remember we touched on signaling theory earlier?
Yeah, that was the one about how we communicate information to influence others' decisions. I remember you mentioned job interviews as an example.
Yeah.
But I'd love to hear more about how signaling works in other contexts.
It's everywhere. Think about advertising, for example.
Yeah.
Companies spend billions of dollars each year trying to signal the quality, value, and desirability of their products.
So even something as simple as a flashy billboard is a strategic move in a game of signaling.
Absolutely. Think about luxury car commercials. They rarely focus on practical features, like fuel efficiency or safety ratings. Instead, they emphasize things like status, exclusivity, and aspiration. They're signaling to potential buyers that owning this car will make them feel a certain way, project a certain image.
So they're not just selling a car. They're selling a lifestyle, an identity. It's all about perception.
Precisely. And consumers, in turn, engage in their own signaling behaviors. Think about why people buy expensive clothes or accessories. It's often not just about the quality of the product itself, but about the signal it sends to others, about their wealth, taste, or social status.
It's like we're all players in a giant game of social signaling, constantly trying to project the right image and interpret the signals of others. It's exhausting.
It can be. But understanding signaling theory can help us decode these interactions and make more informed decisions about how we present ourselves and how we interpret the signals we receive from others.
I'm starting to see the world in a whole new light. Everywhere I look, I see these strategic games playing out. It's like a secret code has been unlocked.
And that code can even help us understand the seemingly irrational behavior of animals.
Yeah.
You mentioned evolutionary biology earlier. That's a field where game theory has led to some truly fascinating insights.
I've always been intrigued by animal behavior. I find it fascinating how creatures with seemingly limited cognitive abilities can exhibit such complex and strategic behaviors. How does game theory explain that?
One of the key insights is that animals, just like humans, are constantly engaged in a struggle for survival and reproduction, and their behaviors, even seemingly altruistic ones, can often be explained as strategies that have evolved over time to maximize their chances of passing on their genes.
So it's not about conscious decision-making, but about behaviors that have been shaped by natural selection over countless generations.
And exactly. Take, for example, the cooperative behavior of meerkats. These small mammals live in tight-knit social groups, and they take turns standing guard, watching for predators while the others forage for food.
That seems awfully generous. Why would one meerkat risk its own safety to protect the others?
From a purely individualistic perspective, it might seem counterintuitive, but through the lens of evolutionary game theory, it makes perfect sense. The meerkats in a group are often closely related, sharing many of the same genes. By protecting the group, the sentinel meerkat is indirectly increasing the chances that its own genes will be passed on to future generations.
So it's like a form of indirect self-interest. It's not just about individual survival.
Yes.
But about the survival of the genes you share with your relative.
Precisely. And this type of kin selection, as it's called, can explain a wide range of cooperative behaviors in the animal kingdom. From the alarm calls of birds to the food sharing of vampire bats.
This is blowing my mind. It's like we're seeing the hidden logic
Yeah.
behind behaviors that might otherwise seem selfless or random.
Evolutionary game theory helps us understand that even the most seemingly complex animal behaviors can often be explained as the outcome of simple strategic interactions, shaped by the relentless forces of natural selection.
I'm starting to feel like I need a whiteboard and a bunch of diagrams to keep track of all these fascinating examples. But before we get too overwhelmed, I want to bring it back to our listener. What's one key takeaway you think they should grasp about the role of game theory in evolutionary biology?
I think the biggest takeaway is that cooperation and altruism aren't always what they seem. Game theory helps us understand that even seemingly selfless acts can often be explained as strategies that have evolved to promote the survival and reproduction of genes.
That's a powerful insight. It challenges our assumptions about the nature of altruism and helps us see the world of animal behavior through a new lens.
It's a reminder that even in the natural world, strategic thinking is constantly at play, shaping the behaviors of creatures great and small.
This is all so fascinating. I'm already seeing the world differently, and I know our listener is too. But before we get too carried away, I think it's time to take another quick pause. We've covered so much ground, from auction theory to signaling theory to the strategic games of meerkats. I need a moment to let all of this sink in.
Take your time. We've covered a lot of ground, and it's important to digest these ideas before we move on. We'll be back soon to explore even more fascinating applications of game theory and uncover even more mind-blowing insights.
All right, deep divers, take a deep breath, grab a snack, and we'll be back in a flash to continue our exploration of the fascinating world of game theory. Welcome back, deep divers. I don't know about you, but my brain is still buzzing from all the incredible examples of game theory we've uncovered. From auctions to animal behavior, it's clear that this framework has some serious explanatory power.
It is remarkable how widely applicable it is. It really speaks to the fact that strategic decision-making is a fundamental aspect of life, whether we're talking about humans, animals, or even computer systems.
And speaking of computer systems, I'm curious to hear more about how game theory is being used in the field of cybersecurity. It's a topic that's constantly in the news these days, and it seems like the stakes just keep getting higher.
Absolutely. Cybersecurity is a prime example of a domain where game theory can be incredibly valuable. As our lives become increasingly digital, the threat of cyber attacks grows exponentially, and the consequences can be devastating.
It feels like every day we hear about another data breach or ransomware attack. It's enough to make you want to unplug from the internet altogether. But seriously, how can game theory help us defend against these increasingly sophisticated threats?
One way is by helping security experts understand the motivations and strategies of cybercriminals. By modeling the interactions between attackers and defenders as a game, we can gain insights into the tactics hackers are likely to use, the vulnerabilities they'll target, and the potential payoffs they're seeking.
So it's like putting ourselves in the mind of the hacker, trying to anticipate their moves before they even make them.
Precisely. By thinking like an attacker, we can identify weaknesses in our systems before they're exploited, and develop strategies to make those systems more resilient.
I see. So it's not just about building stronger walls, but about anticipating where the attackers are likely to strike, and setting traps or diversions to thwart their efforts.
Exactly. Game theory can help us allocate resources more effectively, prioritize vulnerabilities, and design more robust security protocols. For example, a technique known as honeypotting involves setting up decoy systems that lure attackers away from valuable data, giving security teams time to detect and neutralize the threat.
That's so clever. It's like a digital version of a Trojan horse,
Yeah.
using deception to turn the tables on the attacker.
And that's just one example of how game theory is being applied in the cybersecurity realm. It's also being used to design more secure communication protocols, develop algorithms that detect and prevent intrusions, and even create systems that can adapt and learn from past attacks.
It's amazing to think that this theoretical framework can have such a direct impact on real-world security challenges. It's like we're arming ourselves with a new set of tools to fight back against the forces of cybercrime.
And as technology continues to evolve at a breakneck pace, the importance of game theory in cybersecurity will only continue to grow. It's a field that's constantly evolving as new threats emerge and new defense strategies are developed. It's a constant game of cat and mouse.
It is a bit daunting to think that this digital arms race will likely continue indefinitely, but it is reassuring to know that we have tools like game theory
Yeah.
to help us stay one step ahead.
Speaking of global challenges, you also mentioned that game theory can be applied to issues like climate change and environmental conservation. That seems like a whole other level of complexity.
It certainly is, but the fundamental principles of game theory are just as relevant in the realm of environmental policy as they are in cybersecurity or economics. The challenge lies in identifying the players, understanding their incentives, and designing systems that encourage cooperation and sustainable outcomes.
So how does that work in practice? How can game theory help us tackle a problem as massive and complex as climate change? One area where game theory has been applied is in the design of international agreements on climate change. For instance, the Paris Agreement aims to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius, preferably to 1.5 degrees Celsius, compared to pre-industrial levels. But getting all countries to agree on emissions reductions targets And to follow through on those commitments is a monumental challenge.
It's like a giant prisoner's dilemma, right?
Yeah.
Each country has an incentive to prioritize its own economic interests, even if that means shirking its responsibilities to reduce emissions.
Exactly. And that's where game theory can provide valuable insights. By modeling the incentives and potential payoffs for different countries, negotiators can craft agreements that are more likely to be successful. For example, mechanisms like carbon pricing or emissions trading schemes create economic incentives for countries to reduce their carbon footprint.
So it's about finding ways to align individual incentives with collective goals, to make it in each country's best interest to act in a way that benefits the planet as a whole.
Precisely. And this principle can be applied to a wide range of environmental challenges, from managing fisheries to protecting endangered species to designing sustainable urban environments. It's about finding solutions that are both environmentally sound and economically viable.
It is encouraging to know that game theory can be a force for good in the world, helping us address these pressing global challenges. It's a reminder that even in the face of seemingly insurmountable problems, strategic thinking and cooperation can make a real difference.
It's a powerful testament to the potential of human ingenuity and collaboration. And as we continue to grapple with the complexities of the 21st century, I believe game theory will play an increasingly important role in shaping our collective future.
This has been an incredible journey. I want to thank you for being such an insightful guide through the fascinating world of game theory. It's clear that this framework has far-reaching implications, touching nearly every aspect of our lives, from the mundane to the monumental.
It's been my pleasure. I'm always thrilled to share my passion for game theory and to explore its potential to illuminate our understanding of the world and to guide us towards better decisions.
And to our listeners, I hope you've enjoyed this deep dive as much as I have. I encourage you to keep exploring the world of game theory, to see its principles at play in your own lives, and to use this knowledge to make more informed and strategic choices. Remember, the game is always on.
Until next time, keep those strategic minds sharp, and remember that even in the most complex of games, there's always a winning move waiting to be discovered.
And that's a wrap on another mind-expanding deep dive. We'll catch you next time as we delve into another fascinating topic and uncover even more hidden knowledge and unexpected insights. Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.